The dawn of September 1, 1939, marked not just a date, but a seismic shift in human history. As German tanks rolled into Poland, a world still reeling from the scars of the Great War was once again plunged into the abyss of total conflict. But this wasn't an isolated act, it was the culmination of 2 decades of simmering resentments, broken promises, and the inexorable rise of ideologies bent on conquest. This is the story of how the world arrived at the precipice of its deadliest war. To understand the genesis of World War II, we must first revisit its predecessor. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended World War I, but in many ways, it merely paused the conflict. Designed to punish Germany and prevent future aggression, its terms were exceptionally harsh. Germany was stripped of territory, burdened with crippling reparations, and severely limited in its military capacity. The famous War Guilt Clause, Article 231, forced Germany to accept sole responsibility for the war, a deep humiliation that festered in the national psyche. While intended to ensure peace, Versailles inadvertently sowed seeds of resentment. Across Europe, new nations emerged from the ruins of empires, creating a volatile tapestry of shifting borders and ethnic tensions. The League of Nations, an ambitious attempt at collective security, was born from President Woodrow Wilson's idealism, but it lacked the teeth, and crucially, the full participation of major powers like the United States, to effectively enforce its will. The stage was set for a fragile peace, vulnerable to any tremor. As the 1920s gave way to the Great Depression, economic hardship and political instability provided fertile ground for extremist ideologies. In Italy, Benito Mussolini's fascist party seized power, promising order and a return to Roman glory. His blackshirts suppressed dissent, and a cult of personality grew around Il Duce. But it was in Germany where the most dangerous ideology took root. Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis, skillfully exploited public anger and economic despair. Promising to restore German pride, repudiate Versailles, and establish a Third Reich that would last 1,000 years, Hitler's rhetoric found an eager audience. In 1933, he was appointed Chancellor, rapidly consolidating power and transforming Germany into a totalitarian state. Democracy was crushed, political opponents imprisoned, and a relentless propaganda machine began demonizing minorities, particularly Jewish people, laying the groundwork for unimaginable atrocities. Far to the east, another powerful and aggressive ideology was emerging. Japan, a rapidly modernizing imperial power, felt constrained by international agreements and sought to expand its influence and secure vital resources. Militarists gained increasing control, advocating for a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, a euphemism for Japanese dominance over Asia. The League of Nations faced its first major test in 1931 when Japan invaded Manchuria, a resource-rich region of China. Citing a staged incident, Japanese forces swiftly occupied the territory, establishing the puppet state of Manchukuo. The League condemned Japan's actions, but took no meaningful punitive measures beyond moral condemnation. Japan simply withdrew from the League in response, exposing the organization's weakness and setting a dangerous precedent: aggression could pay. This act of aggression escalated into the full-scale Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937, a brutal conflict marked by horrific atrocities, such as the Nanjing Massacre. The international community, preoccupied with its own economic woes and the rising threats in Europe, largely stood by, offering little more than diplomatic protests. The failure to decisively challenge Japan in Manchuria was a critical moment, emboldening other revisionist powers. Emboldened by the League's inaction, Hitler systematically began dismantling the Treaty of Versailles. In 1935, he announced rearmament, reintroducing conscription and rapidly expanding the German military. The following year, German troops reoccupied the Rhineland, a demilitarized zone crucial to France's security. Each violation was met with little more than mild protests from Britain and France, who were wary of another costly war and clung to the hope that Hitler's ambitions could be contained through diplomacy, a policy that came to be known as appeasement. Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, became the face of appeasement, genuinely believing that through negotiation, war could be averted. This approach, however, was fundamentally flawed. It misjudged Hitler's true intentions, interpreting his territorial demands as legitimate grievances rather than steps in a larger plan of conquest. The Spanish Civil War, erupting in 1936, provided a grim dress rehearsal for the coming global conflict. General Francisco Franco, leading a nationalist uprising against the democratically elected Republican government, received significant military aid from Fascist Italy and Nazi Germany. The Luftwaffe's Condor Legion experimented with new bombing tactics, devastating towns like Guernica, offering a chilling preview of future aerial warfare. The Western democracies, torn by internal divisions and committed to non-intervention, offered little direct support to the Republicans. This asymmetric involvement not only helped Franco to victory but also solidified the alliance between Hitler and Mussolini, forming the Rome-Berlin Axis. Japan would later join, creating the formidable Axis powers. The war in Spain was a brutal ideological clash, a proxy battle that underscored the growing divide between totalitarian and democratic states. With the Spanish Civil War winding down, Hitler turned his gaze eastward. In March 1938, German troops marched into Austria, executing the Anschluss, or political union. Despite explicit prohibitions in Versailles, Austria was swiftly absorbed into the Third Reich. Again, the international response was largely impotent. Next on Hitler's agenda was Czechoslovakia, specifically the Sudetenland, a region with a significant German-speaking population. Hitler claimed the Sudeten Germans were being persecuted and demanded the territory be ceded to Germany. The crisis culminated in the infamous Munich Conference in September 1938. Without Czechoslovakia's representation, Britain, France, and Italy agreed to Hitler's demands, believing it would secure peace in our time. Chamberlain returned to London a hero, but for Czechoslovakia, Munich was a profound betrayal. It exposed the hollowness of appeasement and merely whetted Hitler's appetite. Within 6 months, Germany violated the agreement, occupying the rest of Czechoslovakia, proving that his ambitions extended far beyond German-speaking territories. The illusion of peace shattered, and a stark reality emerged: Hitler would not be appeased. With Czechoslovakia under German control, Hitler's attention shifted to Poland, particularly the Polish corridor and the Free City of Danzig. Poland, however, was not Czechoslovakia. It had a mutual defense treaty with Britain and France, who now, finally, drew a line in the sand. Any attack on Poland would mean war. But Hitler had one more strategic maneuver. To avoid a two-front war, a lesson learned from World War I, he sought an understanding with his ideological adversary, the Soviet Union. On August 23, 1939, the world watched in stunned disbelief as Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty. Secret protocols within the pact outlined the division of Poland and other Eastern European territories into German and Soviet spheres of influence. It was a cynical alliance, but a pragmatic one for both dictators, giving Hitler the green light he needed. The pact sent shockwaves across Europe. With the Eastern Front secured, Hitler was convinced that Britain and France would back down, just as they had repeatedly before. He dismissed their guarantees to Poland as bluster. The stage was now tragically set. At 4:45 a.m. on September 1, 1939, the German battleship Schleswig-Holstein opened fire on the Polish naval base at Westerplatte. Simultaneously, 1.5 million German troops, supported by tanks and aircraft, launched a full-scale invasion of Poland. The Blitzkrieg, lightning war, had begun, a new form of warfare characterized by speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. Poland's army, though courageous, was outmatched and outmaneuvered. Its cavalry charges against German tanks quickly became a tragic symbol of outdated military doctrine against modern mechanized warfare. As cities fell and the Polish defense crumbled, the world held its breath. On September 3, after their ultimatums for German withdrawal expired, Britain and France reluctantly declared war on Germany. The fragile peace of the interwar years had finally shattered. World War II, a conflict that would claim tens of millions of lives and reshape the global order, had officially begun. The road to war was paved with shattered hopes and the tragic failures of a generation. Join us next time as we delve into the early days of the conflict, the fall of Poland, and the desperate struggle that followed.